Hello, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle, where we tell it like it is. Friends, Inside the Trojans Huddle is a game-like panel discussion with WeAreSC columnists, staff writers, historians, and editorial board. We first start off with the pregame show, where we introduce our panel members for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and then give you the latest USC Trojans football news. First, let's meet this week's panelists. Marc Kulkin, WeAreSC columnist, who writes the Monday Morass, Yay or Nay, and Sunday Takeaways, in addition to regular season football and basketball practice reports. Chris Arledge, former William Jewell College defensive back and team captain, WeAreSC columnist, who writes the popular column Musings with Arledge, and is a graduate of the USC Law School. Bruce Bagni, we welcome him back, chairman and CEO of WeAreSC.com, and Greg Katz, that's me, your moderator and producer of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and a weekly WeAreSC columnist who writes the obvious and not so obvious IMHO Sunday and is an active member of the Football Writers Association of America. Before we kick off this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, here is the latest football news as of today's Monday taping. This upcoming Monday, July 4th, highly acclaimed class of 2023 five-star tackle, offensive lineman, Francis Mauigoa from IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida, will announce his college choice from amongst USC, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, and Miami. Dave Emmerich, former Senior Associate Athletic Director for football at Mississippi State, is expected to be officially announced as USC's new General Manager, Senior Associate Athletic Director of football. For the past 18 years, Emmerich has worked under head coach Mike Leach, from Texas Tech to Washington State to Mississippi State. Both Emmerich and Riley once worked together at Texas Tech. The Trojans received a class of 2023 commitment last week from two-way athlete Cade Eldridge from Linden, Washington, Linden High. Although unranked in recruiting services, the 6'4", 235-pounder, Eldridge was also offered by Oregon, Michigan, Utah, and Washington State. The early forecast is that Eldridge will be used as an H-back in the Trojans offense. And the great 2022 offensive jersey mystery of who would be wearing jersey number 13, worn by both quarterback Caleb Williams and wide receiver Michael Jackson III, apparently has been ended, or at least solved. Jackson has announced that he has signed an NIL deal with NFT Project Ballers Series 1 collection, and in a tweet is shown wearing jersey number 9, an offensive number that was available. And class of 2023 quarterback commit Malachi Nelson, a senior at Los Alamitos High School, announced last week that he has signed an NIL deal with H. Wood Group, a major hospitality and restaurant company, which was co-founded by John Terzian, a former Trojans walk-on quarterback who sat behind Carson Palmer and Matt Leinart right before the Pete Carroll era was underway. And finally, friends, WeAreSC's Inside the Trojans Huddle greatly appreciates your viewer and listenership. We encourage those of you watching on sites like YouTube to click on the red subscriber and like buttons. It's greatly appreciated, valued, and it is free. All right, it's time for the opening kickoff on our first quarter topic. As mentioned in the opening segment of USC football headlines, this Monday, July 4th, five-star offensive lineman Francis Mauigoa from IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida, will announce his college choice from, again, USC, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, and Miami. Panel, time to make your Mauigoa prediction and reason for it, and what it means if he does or he does not select the Trojans. As usual, our leadoff hitter, Marc Kulkin. Where's he going, buddy?
Man, you know, he was scheduled to do a late July announcement. He just finished his official visit to Tennessee, and upon completion of that official visit, as you stated, he's moving it up to July 4th. Prior to all that, you know, our own Scott Schrader had said it's going to come down to a USC versus Alabama battle. So here's the thing, though. You're not hearing Alabama's name come up. I hear about USC's name because I pay attention to USC more than I pay attention to Alabama. I'm seeing Miami throw around rumors, millions of dollars. I'm wondering why they're out of the picture. And like I said, I know what Tennessee did with their quarterback that's coming in from high school. I know Nico and Francis Mauigoa are really close. I believe Nico said they're brothers from another mother. Pete Carroll needed one guy, and he got Sean Cody to turn the tide. Lincoln Riley needs Francis Mauigoa. We all want it. I just don't feel it. I think he's going to end up at Tennessee. I know that was a long build-up to go, but that's what it is.
That was a very good sound effect, I might add. I could feel the presence. That I think, out of total respect for what you just said, you know what? You presented it pretty well. For those that are not familiar with the quarterback that committed from Southern California, who's now at Long Beach Poly, give that name again for everybody that is maybe not as familiar as.
You're going to make me say it. So it's Nico.
That's why I'm doing it. Of course, I'm making you say
I don't
it.
even have a pulled up. Nico Mauigoa. Forgive me, Nico, for butchering it. But he plays at Long Beach Poly. He transferred from Downey.
Right.
He is considered one of the top high school quarterbacks for the class of 23. He is allegedly going to be making, by the time he leaves Tennessee, over $8 million.
God,
He has yet to play his senior year of high school, football in high school.
ridiculous.
And like I said, Francis just finished his official visit. Tennessee is doing everything that Texas A&M is being accused of doing by Nick Saban. So it's hard to see Francis saying, you know what, I'm going to come back to the West Coast because I'm close out there. I've got family out there. I love USC. Look, I love USC, but if someone's offering me $8 million to go somewhere for 3 or 4 years,
They're not.
I can still love USC and collect my money.
All right, well, let's move on to Dr. Arledge here. He says they're not. Where's he going?
I have no idea where he's going. The truth is, I don't talk to these kids, and even if I did, 18-year-olds are weird. They make strange decisions all the time. And the schools he's looking at, look, I can imagine why all of them would be appealing for one reason or another, in addition to NIL cash. I don't know what to make of the NIL numbers that get thrown about. These contracts, for the most part, are not public. We don't get to see them. We don't even know who the sources are most of the time for this stuff. So I don't even know whether to believe these numbers. It certainly would make sense to pick USC for a lot of reasons. There are going to be some holes to fill. He could play early. He could play on for what is likely to be a pretty good team over the next few years. But, if he went to Alabama or if he went to Tennessee and made some money, even staying in Miami, I could see being a good choice for some people. He's already in Florida. So I have no idea. Here's what I do know. Lincoln Riley does not need him. And we talk about the Sean Cody example from Pete Carroll's time. Does anybody here think that Pete Carroll would have failed had Sean Cody decided to go elsewhere? He wouldn't have. That was the sign for fans that something had changed from the Paul Hackett days. But if Cody had gone elsewhere, Pete Carroll still would have thrived. He doesn't have to have this kid. I'm sure he wants him. It would be a nice thing to have him, especially because we struck out on Josh Connerly. Clay Helton struck out on just about everybody over the last few years on the offensive line. So this would be a nice thing. It would make us feel better. Lincoln Riley doesn't have to have it. If he doesn't get him, he'll find other players. He may find other players in the portal next year. It's not life or death. So I'm not going to worry about it. I have no idea where he's going to go. I hope it's USC. If it's not, that doesn't really change anything in terms of what the next 3-4 years are going to be like for the Trojans.
All right, now Bruce Bagni is coming to us from Jacksonville, Florida. And so
He's also drinking heavily, I noticed. I saw that, Bruce.
You saw the red wine, did you?
I did. I think
that was Cardinal. It was Cardinal color.
It was Cardinal wine, and it was
USC special Cardinal.
Just grape juice.
Yeah, from the bookstore. You had
not non-alcoholic, but listen, you guys know so much more about recruiting than I do. I read the stuff. I think this kid's a tremendous player from what I can tell. IMG Academy usually is a pretty good pedigree. I still don't get how, and if let's assume for the sake of argument, the 8 million is a real number. I don't know how that can be used in recruiting. I'm still unclear as to how that could or should be used. But it sounds to me like buying a player, and I wasn't sure still not clear whether or not NIL allows that. Does the NIL allow that?
Well,
So
there's no sheriff anymore.
Yeah.
The sheriff is gone, and so the truth is, you're not supposed to have boosters contacting players and offering them money before they sign with you. You're not supposed to do that. The NCAA says, but the NCAA doesn't have any power to arrest anybody anymore. So I'm not sure it matters what the NCAA thinks.
Well, okay. Can you guys see me, by the way? I can't see myself.
Just
Yeah.
the people on the
Okay.
podcast can't see you.
Oh, okay, okay. But look, the kid's a great player. I don't think he's critical. There's a question from one of our members about, recruiting wide receivers. I much prefer having the big uglies, the big bodies, offensive line and defensive line, and this guy would certainly fit that bill. But I think there are reasons why he might come to LA. He's from here. He's got family here. He's Samoan. We have a rich Samoan tradition here. I can't imagine why anybody would want to live in Knoxville. I've been there before many times on business. Compared to LA and what LA has to offer, that it doesn't seem even close. But anyway, that's where it'd be a great get, but I'll leave it up to Schrader and you other guys who follow it closely.
All right, well, I'll wrap this quarter up by saying everything that Marc has told the viewers and listeners, 100% on. I watched an interview of Mauigoa that was released. Many of you probably have seen it, where he goes over and he talks about it. I think the thing that kind of struck me about is on this recruiting trip, he had his family. There was grandparents on the trip. One of the unique things was one of the grandparents didn't speak English and another one was bilingual. And that was like a big deal. And that was, I think, was the quarterback commitment's grandfather. And so I saw that bonding. I think there's the bonding from the fact that Mauigoa could play left tackle and he could be blocking for the quarterback coming in. I think one of the unique things is that, excuse me, the Trojans defensive line coach, Nua, he was a student in Mauigoa's mother's middle school class back in Samoa, from what I understand, which adds a little bit more of a introspect. But I am going to not prolong this. I believe he's going to Tennessee, and I wish I wasn't saying that. And Marc, you got your finger up there, so
I was just going to say, when that happens, I would anticipate another diamond in the rough announcement shortly thereafter, in the trenches.
For USC.
Yes.
Okay.
And Chris, I just want to say, when I say that Lincoln, to use the comparison of Lincoln Riley to Pete Carroll in that context alone, if USC and Lincoln Riley right now, he's the head man, wants to get the 4- and 5-star offensive lineman, eventually you got to pluck one. You can't just say, well, we lost out on Josh Conerly. But the flip side is, the transfer portal can balance that out in a year or two. But eventually you need to get the 4- and 5-star offensive lineman. You can't just say, oh, we're getting the diamond in the roughs now because Lincoln Riley.
No question. I'm just not convinced that if he loses out on this kid, all hope is lost.
Of course not. No, it's not that dire.
But yeah, I mean, he knows better than anybody that at some point he needs to start landing his top targets on the offensive and defensive lines. If he doesn't do that, he's not going to be as successful as he wants to be.
That was my only point.
Yeah.
I think a big thing we forget about is how important next year's season is and how well they do. And people that, I think we all want that instant success of recruiting. We all wanted Josh Connolly Jr., Lincoln's here. He's the savior. Well, if they don't get Mauigoa, there is a little bit of a perception there that says, well, that's two. Okay. And a lot of times perception is reality, whether we like it or not. So it'll be very interesting. Again, Mauigoa will announce on July 4th. I would say check your computer. It might be live on one of the cable stations, maybe CBS HQ, and we'll kind of go from there. So let's move on. Second quarter topic. With so many storylines arriving at the start of training camp, which is almost right around the corner, basically, what do you think is currently the biggest storyline? So let's start off with Bruce from the East Coast. What do you think the biggest storyline is heading into fall practice?
Okay, I think it's sort of, I think there's this kind of an open question about whether anybody else joins the team from the portal. But I think the big storyline is both sides of the line. To me, that's if you're going to be a championship team, you better be strong in the trenches. And so I'm really going to be curious to see how these guys respond and what the starting group is coming out of training camp.
Mark, you see this, you're at practice and you've been at practice when it's been available for the media. And I will be joining you this fall, summer, whatever it is, depending on what the thermometer is reading at the time. But I'll let you bake it 100 degrees. But that being said, what is the top storyline in your opinion heading into fall camp?
So I think there's going to be two, but on the surface of what everybody will be able to see is that front seven on the defensive side of the ball. They got to make sure that the defensive line and the linebacker crew is solid. It can't be loose. I'm looking for solid. We can define that however you want. For me, solid is not allowing 200 yards per game rush. If we can knock that down to 150, it's a good sign. The other thing is, and I wrote about this, there's still 71 players on this team that were around last year. So even with, all the rosters adjustments that are going on, and we're going to talk about that more later, and you can try as hard as you want to change bad habits. I'm still concerned about that residual effect, how long it's going to be till they completely flush it out.
Okay, Chris, can they flush it out? Or what is your perspective on the top? I don't even know why we call it fall camp. It's not even in the fall, just training camp.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
So the big issue is how the front seven comes together. I mean, that's the offense is going to be explosive. They're going to score a ton of points. It's going to be a top 5 offense. Okay, it is, unless there are some big injuries on that group. It is too talented. They have an outstanding quarterback. They have one of the great offensive minds in college football. They're going to score a ton of points. The defense doesn't have to be great, which is good because they're not going to be great. What the defense has to be able to make some plays. When Chip Kelly was at Oregon, and Oregon was winning, 10, 11 games a year, and they were in a similar situation where the offense was always explosive. They could score instantly from anywhere on the field. And the defense wasn't great, but what they did well is they made some big plays, a sack, a pick, something to turn the tide on that side of the ball. Because when you have an offense that's that explosive, it only takes a couple of lost possessions by the other side to find themselves in a 14 or 21 point hole. And then you're in a lot of trouble, right? So the defense has to be able to get after the quarterback a little bit. They have to get some big plays, knock the ball loose. They have to jump some routes, make some picks. They can play aggressively. They can play aggressively because they can afford to give up some points, knowing that the offense is still going to be scoring so many. And the question is whether they're going to be able to do that. Are we going to get a good pass rush from Height or from Corey Foreman? I don't know the answer to that yet. Are we going to be able to stop the run up the middle? I think so, but I don't know. But that's the question, because if the defense can simply be pretty decent and fairly opportunistic, you're going to win 10 or 11 games with that offense. You just are. But that's the question.
Yeah, great.
And I'll sum it up by agreeing with Chris. I think the top overall storyline heading into training camp is the defense. And I'm not going to say specifically rush defense. I think it's the whole defense. I think all of them working in concert with each other, just who, and then you can go down to, you can break it down into the Foremans, of course, and the Heights, and you can talk about Brandon Peely. I mean, there's just a lot of moving parts in there. And I think in the end, like I agree with Chris. I think they're going to score will unless there's something wrong with it, which isn't going to happen. But it's really about when they end up playing the Utahs and some of the other more challenging teams. Even UCLA is going to score points. Can they stop them and not just try to outscore them? So I say it is the defense overall. So let's move on to halftime. Excuse me. Here's your question. I've kind of liked this question myself. We've all gone to high school. So panel, tell us what high school you attended. Who was the most famous football player from your high school that went on to play football at USC? If you didn't have a future USC football player in the history of your high school, what's the most famous prep player from your high school who went on to play college or the NFL? Chris, anybody coming out? You tell us what high school you were from and any Trojans in there.
Well, I played for the Lake Elsinore Tigers, which is, arguably one of the top 3 programs in California. You'd think traditionally you would think modern day Long Beach Poly and Lake Elsinore. Hey, Kulkin, don't laugh at that. That's not funny. I'll say funny stuff later.
I thought that was great the way you tied in LE, LB, and modern day MD. You had all the initials going for it.
Yeah. All right. Well, as far as I know, nobody from Lake Elsinore has gone on to play at USC. I'm not sure anybody from Lake Elsinore has even become a student at USC.
You went to law school, man. You went to the
Well, I did. I didn't go to USC as an undergrad. I don't know if that's ever happened. I don't think we've had. I know that we had a running back a few years after I was gone. He went to Oregon State. He was a pretty good player. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. It isn't the richest athletic tradition ever. That being said, we did beat Kyle Wacholtz when he was at Norco. Rub that, Kyle. And I would also point out that we thrashed Corona Centennial my senior year. We shut them out. Now they had only been around for 2 years at the time, so they weren't what they are now. They're not a juggernaut. But I would just point out that my record against Centennial, which is one of the great programs in California, is 1-0, and it wasn't close.
Who knew?
Yeah, I knew.
Well, obviously,
Yeah.
you brought it up. Bruce Bagni. Now you're from another part of Southern California.
I grew up in the San Fernando Valley in Van Nuys. I went to Birmingham High School. When we were seniors, we finished second in the city to Manual Arts, by the way. And they had a great defensive tackle. His name was Harry Wells. You remember him, Greg?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was tough. But the 2 guys that were SC guys, actually 3. One was Jerry Hayhoe. The other one was Mike Scarpace.
Great players.
And they were both. Now, Scarpace was a junior when we were seniors. Hayhoe was tremendous. Hayhoe's younger brother, I can't remember, is Bill Hayhoe.
Bill Hayhoe, yeah.
Yeah, he played at SC and he played for the Packers. The thing that I will just make a little side note here. We finished second in the city. The 2 biggest guys, this is 1961 season. The 2 biggest guys on the team were Hayhoe and God, I'm trying to think what the other guys, the other tackle. Scarpace played guard at that time. They were both 220. 220. They were the biggest guys on the team. Hell, you could hardly play safety at 220 now. The game has changed so much, but those guys were both tremendous. They both played in the NFL. Actually, all 3 did. Scarpace played too. And but just as a side note, right down the street, actually 2 years ahead of us, down the road at Reseda High School, there was a guy named Hal Bedsole who played quarterback at Reseda. He was a great quarterback, became a receiver at SC, and then went on to play in the NFL. But we had a lot of great players at that time in the Valley.
I think Pacino made a movie about your teammate too, didn't he?
Which one?
You're saying Scarface, right?
Scarface.
Yeah, Mike Scarface. I think we all saw that, did we not?
That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
it's a good movie. Wild. He lived a wild life, though, that guy.
Oh yeah. Well, Scarface. the thing about it is he moved to Miami after that.
That's what I'm saying. Got into some stuff. Huh.
A couple of notes on the names that Bruce, as we affectionately refer to as the Godfather around here. Bill Hayhoe is very famous for having blocked the extra points and also field goal attempts by Zenon Andrusician in the famous 67 USC UCLA game. Mike Scarpace was the strong side guard on the line for O.J. Simpson. Scarpace basically was next to, I believe it was Ranieri. And I saw Mike Scarpace when I was a recreation director in Monterey Park come in, and he was just an animal on the court. He was like 6'1", 255, and
yeah,
you didn't want to take a charge from Mike. Let's just put it that way.
He was a tough dude.
He was
Very tough guy.
tough cookie. Okay, Mark, where did you graduate from, and was there any SC players that you know of came from your high school?
So I went to Millikan High School in Long Beach, and Millikan was never known as a football school. They were always the baseball school, the Moore League. So I had to actually, jump on the internet to look somebody up. And the best I could come up with was a Michael Brown, also known as Ron Brown. He played linebacker, and I think he ran track also.
Right.
He's just a few years older than me, but I had no idea he even went to Millikan. So when I was entering, I believe he was graduating. My school is probably most well known for the movie American Pie was filmed there.
Really?
So yeah. And again, Millikan was known as the baseball school. So I never knew our high school beating Long Beach Poly in football ever. However, USC starting to pay attention to Millikan now. They've got quite a few young players that they're recruiting. So let's ask this question again in a few years.
All right. Very good. Very good. American Pie. That's a very interesting one. You didn't get a nickname out of that, did you, Mark?
No. That movie.
I know Arledge is going to know this. What was the name, Arledge, of the guy that played, who was like the raunchy guy in American Pie? What was it? Stifler, yes.
Yeah.
You weren't Stifler, were you? That was not your nickname. Please tell me it wasn't.
No. This movie was made 10 years after I graduated from Millikan. If we want to attach a movie character, I would have been Bender from Breakfast Club.
Wow. Really?
Bender. I never saw the Breakfast Club. Was Bender a big drinker?
Oh, shame on you, Bruce.
Well, I've seen. You have to understand.
It was the role that Judd. What's his last name?
I know the guy you're talking about.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
His last name's escaping me. He was part of the Brat Pack, the new
That's
Brat
right,
Pack.
right.
Well, look, I'm going to just throw this out, okay, for what it's worth, give you a little ancient history. But when I was at SC, I was a political science major, but I took a cinema class as an elective. And it used to be over in the old film school, and it was a class at night taught by a guy by the name of Arthur Knight, who was the big film critic for Playboy and others. But I remember walking out of there at night, and several times I walked along and I saw this little guy under the overhang there. It was on the Spanish style place. And this little guy was there cutting film. And about the third time I stopped, I said, "Hey man, every time I come by here, I see you doing this." And he said, "Yeah, I'm trying to learn how to do this." And I said, "Oh, my name's Bruce Bagni." And he said, "Oh, nice to meet you. My name's George Lucas."
Did he ever do anything?
Huh?
Did he ever do anything?
No, he never did.
Oh, that's too bad. All that work.
Yeah.
All that. Well, I'll tell you what, a great story about, if I could just quickly tell you the great story about Lucas. Lucas did American Graffiti, okay, and he did it with
Ron Howard.
But the producer was the guy who did The Godfather. What's his name?
Francis Ford Coppola.
Yeah. Anyway, but it was a great movie. It's kind of like my high school days and yours, Greg. That was Van Nuys. He grew up in Modesto, but that was Van Nuys Boulevard, basically. Okay. But he did that movie, but then he came up with this idea about these guys in space, right? So he's pitching it to the different studios, and they're the first, we're not interested. That's too far out, and all this stuff. It'll never make it. So he ends up at the one studio that does it. And they get down to the bottom line here on the deal. And he or his agent says, okay, so we'll take 5% of the gross, which is, the Hollywood model. You take money off the top. And they said, are you kidding? You don't have any real experience here. We're not doing that. We'll pay you $250,000 or whatever, something like that. And he said, okay, I'll tell you what, if I can't get 5% off the top, just grant me exclusive and eternal permanent rights to all the merchandise. And they said yes. And he ended up making billions of dollars just on the merchandise. And then the rest is history. Made tons of money in the movies. But that's just a little bit of a story about an SC guy.
Very interesting. I'll wrap this halftime up. I went to Alhambra High School, which was one of the largest high schools in Southern California at the time. My parents went there, while my uncles and aunts went there. But in terms of football players, the name I used to always hear from my dad was Orv Moeller. Orv Moeller.
Oh, yeah. Of Moral, yeah.
So Orv Moeller was a famous, I think he was All-America quarterback.
Oh, yeah. Back in the 40s or 50s.
40s, 30s, yeah.
Yeah.
And the other one was a guy named John Thomas, who was a tight end for USC.
Oh, yeah. It's great.
60s,
Tremendous. Yeah.
Yeah. Whose son, JT Thomas, by the way, played on some of the great Edison football teams in the late 70s. And he was also a linebacker tight end and was a great player. So there was a lot of players that came out of my high school that were very well known, went to UCLA all over the place. Probably most famous, I think, athlete we had was Ralph Kiner, who was the Hall of Fame baseball.
Pretty good baseball player. Played for the Giants, or
yeah. I went to his grammar school, and they had a bat inside one of the trophy cases, and I had his sixth grade teacher. I had her, Miss Bloomingdale, God rest her soul. But anyway, let's move on here. So that's we completed that. So before we get into the second half, a reminder that you're listening to WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle. This week's WeAreSC panelists include Marc Kulkin, Chris Arledge, Bruce Bagni, and I am Greg Katz. We encourage you to check out WeAreSC.com's website, part of the On3 network, and become a subscriber to the best coverage of USC football and Trojans athletics. And a reminder, WeAreSC is currently offering a WeAreSC 7-day free trial, which includes monthly or yearly payment options to view our exclusive On3 Plus content, which includes breaking stories, analysis, data for USC football, basketball, and the balance of USC athletes. All righty. Let's kick off the second half, third quarter panel. Fall classes begin at USC on Monday, August 22nd. Obviously, USC football practice figures to start right around August 1st, which is a little more than a month from now. Do you think the roster for the 2022 season is now basically set? Or do you still anticipate there will be a few more roster additions or subtractions right up to the very start of training camp? Mark, what do you think?
Well, I think it's essentially set. So, anybody who joins now, unless they're going to get a waiver from the NCAA, they're going to be a practice squad guy. So, I think Lincoln left 4 spots open, 4 scholars open. And
why is that? Why is that? Is there a rule
in case, somebody comes along that, can really help? I have to assume that's the only reason.
Okay.
And, there's going to be attrition through, training camp, fall camp, whatever we're going to call it. Injuries happen. We're still not clear on Max Gibbs' status. But I would not anticipate him being back this season. So, maybe he goes out and maybe Lincoln goes out and grabs another offensive lineman. Who knows? Someone might leave another program. So that's why. Again, unless they can get a waiver from the NCAA, they're just coming in for depth and practice squad.
All right, Chris, is this roster set in stone, or should we expect a few more transactions, as they like to say, before training camp opens? What do you think?
I don't know, but for the reason that Mark just pointed out, I wouldn't expect any big splashes. I think it's more likely that Riley will give a couple of those scholarships to a walk-on that's deserving. But no, I think the group we're going to see in the fall is there now.
All right, Godfather, where are we headed here? Is this what you see is what you get? Or do you expect
pretty much so. And I basically agree with Chris and Mark, but I will say this. I will never underestimate Lincoln Riley and his ability to attract people to SC. I think he's got I mean, Oklahoma was okay, but now he's got a great story to tell, and he's a great storyteller and is a great recruiter. So I would assume probably not, but you never know.
And it's interesting, Chris said, to offer a couple walk-ons to Scullies. Typically, that's what happens at the end of fall camp. Someone gets rewarded. But, leading up to, we've been taking the scholarships away and putting players on financial aid packages to open up a roster spot. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. Because I agree with Chris. That's how it should be done.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I'm gonna throw a little excitement into this group. I've been told by two separate sources. Look at Chris is so excited. I feel like
some excitement. I couldn't wait.
I know. I finally got
We've
something.
been short on excitement this whole program.
No question. I've heard from two separate sources that there are a few. I hate to mention numbers, but we'll just leave it at that. JC players that they're still looking to bring in, and from what I understand, it's offensive line possibilities.
Okay.
So there's a lot going on, even though it's not visible to all of us. It may be like a lot of quote sources, rumors, but these were pretty much people that I know generally have an idea of what's going on. So maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't, but it's something to keep an eye on and go from there. So
that's why you're in the big chair, Katz, because you're bringing in that inside information that nobody else had.
Well, what Chris doesn't say is I'm actually sitting on a high chair because I need to be able to prop myself up. All right. So you all know what this means. We're going to go into the fourth quarter of Inside the Trojans Huddle with the traditional lighting of the Chris Arledge Coliseum torch in preparation for the great one's wrath, monologue, attack, call it what you want. But before we unleash WeRSC's version of the Kraken, a reminder, any comments or opinions expressed by Chris Arledge are solely those of his own and are not in any shape or form a reflection of the opinions of our panel, WeRSC or On3. Any republication, rebroadcast, use or description of Musings with Arledge without the express written consent of the Screen Actors Guild or the National Hockey League is going to be prohibited. So, ladies and gentlemen, we now bring you an exclusive Inside the Trojans Huddle version of Christopher Arledge's Musings with Arledge.
Well, thank you. Greg, I think you know by now that what really motivates me, what really gets me excited to get out of bed every morning is helping people. So I have some thoughts that I think might benefit all of our viewers. Now, we know that college football is already a wildly popular television event. The ratings are great, in part because the cameras are better, the TVs are bigger, they have better definition, and there are more televised games than ever. ABC, ESPN, CBS, Fox. And these days, all of the major conferences even have their own conference networks, so you can see the games that big networks didn't pick up. You might say I'm a dreamer, but someday I truly believe the Pac-12 might have one also. Still, I think there are some things we can do to make the TV viewing experience even better. And first, I want to talk about some new technologies that might make a difference. Most websites, including WeRSC, have a feature that allow you to block certain posters so you can read the message boards without seeing what those people have written. It's a nice feature. It keeps you from getting unnecessarily angry with people that you think are stupid. What if we could do that with college football on TV? Let's say you didn't want to listen to Joel Klatt or Petros. I mean, a feature where you could mute them would be a nice thing to have if you were so inclined, but people have been talking about that for years. But what if we could make it even better? What if we could replace that disfavored announcer with somebody you actually want to hear? Maybe we could use artificial intelligence so that the television could determine when a comment would be appropriate. And to take an example, if somebody scores a touchdown and Joel Klatt starts speaking, his voice would be replaced just for you with Keith Jackson saying, "Whoa, Nelly."
Yeah.
Or my choice, James Earl Jones could read the press release about Clay Helton's firing. That'd be amazing, right? It would send shivers up your spine. And by the way, yes, that was an early Clay Helton reference. And I want to make my position very clear for all of you at home. Anytime I see even one comment demanding that I stop talking about Clay Helton, whether it's in the YouTube comments, on the We Are SC message board, wherever, you can be sure that Clay will make an appearance the following week in this program. It's guaranteed. So if you don't like that sort of thing, you've been warned. Now let's take it a step further. What if you could actually block out disfavored visuals in the game? Let me just pick an example at random to see if I can make some sense of this. Let's say you're a fan of, I don't know, let's just throw a dart at the wall, Georgia Southern. And let's assume, and I don't know if this is true, that every time something goes wrong on the field, your coach's face has this open mouth look of shock, like it's impossible to believe this is happening, even if that particular event happens every other series and has been for many years. And let's also assume that you hate that look so much that when you see it, you just want to throw a brick through your television. Now, with this new technology, you could simply block out that face. And you have some options. You can make it so anytime that face appears on the screen, the coach just disappears and you get some natural looking background. Kind of like the Communist Party group photos in Stalin's day, where a person who had fallen out of favor would disappear not only in real life, but also from the old photographs, like they never even existed. Or if you wanted, you could replace that coach's face with John McKay's, or say the face of a 25-year-old Halle Berry. Not bad, right? And I can think of other uses. The Stanford tree, the Notre Dame leprechaun and cheerleaders, that UCLA towel waver guy when he was around, all gone. Or how about the mom of one of the quarterbacks playing in the game? You know how some weeks they constantly show the family of one of the players? I don't want to sound calloused, but I don't care about that guy's mom. I get it. It's a big third down and she looks really nervous. Or her son threw a touchdown pass. Look, she's so happy. She's crying. She's hugging her daughter. Enough of that. I hate that stuff, and now I can block it. By the way, network suits, if you're listening, and I know you are, we don't need you to give us public interest stories to make college football exciting. I'm not watching the game because I'm interested in whether that quarterback had always wanted to play at A&M and used to wear an Aggies jersey to school every day. Human interest stuff is for local news, which I don't watch, and for Olympics coverage, when you're trying to get us interested in some fringe sport that nobody cares about. Why should I care about the outcome of this made-up sport with a girl spinning around with a ribbon? Because her grandfather escaped from Ceausescu's Romania and she's had to bravely overcome eczema. Whatever. I don't care about this background stuff. I'm blocking the public interest nonsense with this new technology. But if you're going to give us that personal information, can we at least get something fun and honest? Ooh, what a hit by the linebacker, John Doe. Yes, it was, Bill. And did you know that Doe might be the most disliked player on his team? He steals beer from his teammates' fridge, and he often hits on their girlfriends. I'm not saying we have to have this information, but if we're going to get personal information, let's at least have some relevant, honest stuff. Now, just a few thoughts for the announcers. First, no more crazy comparisons. How many times have I heard an announcer say, oh, look at that cut. That looked like Barry Sanders. You know who reminds me of Barry Sanders? Nobody. Not one person ever. Nobody is like Barry Sanders. And I know for a fact that the 3-6 Sun Belt Conference team we're watching this Saturday does not have anybody who changes direction like Barry Sanders. Stop saying that stuff. It's stupid. Second, let's end these interviews by sideline reporters. Why do we call them reporters anyway? What do we think these people are chasing down? Do we think they're out trying to scrounge up hidden documents from secret sources like Woodward and Bernstein? Are they combing through microfiche files in the Library of Congress to overcome highly critical but unknown facts about the visiting team's offensive system? Of course not. They're not reporters. They stand there. Sometimes somebody on the sideline will tell them about an injury. If so, they repeat it. verbatim. That's not reporting. An 8-year-old could do that job. A reporter, if they were reporters, might occasionally give us something valuable, but we never get anything valuable. No coach ever tells a sideline reporter, well, we've been watching the defensive end. That guy never pays attention to the quarterback. Whenever we run away from him, he's always sprinting like his hair is on fire to chase down the running back from behind. So we're going to take advantage of that and run a bootleg in a key situation. Now that would be good information, but no coach is going to say that because it would be ridiculous. Why does a sideline reporter job even exist? Enough with that. Finally, I want the broadcast to start providing more useful and honest statistics. Look, I know we're not going to get the truth from the broadcast team. They simply can't say that the coach for the home team was a poster boy for the Peter principle, even when he was still the high school tight ends coach. They won't say it even if they know it to be true. It's hard to say stuff like that about people you have to interact with face to face, and they don't want to get the wrath of the sports information department. So they're not going to tell us the truth, and I get it. But here's what they could do. They could tell a story through relevant stats without offering any subjective opinion at all. Imagine, Brent, Clay Helton has led the Pac-12 in first quarter timeouts for the last 4 years. Wouldn't that be relevant and useful information? Or USC is third in the nation this year in delay of game penalties with 1.7 per game. During Pete Carroll's tenure, USC averaged only 0.3 a game. That would be interesting and useful information. And USC calls a timeout because they only had 10 men on the field. One more of those and Clay Helton will be USC's all-time leader in that category. Stats like that would be great. That's announcing gold. Look, we're never going to be able to convince these announcers to be honest with us. They all know, but will not even say the most obvious things. Like the fact that those Alabama fans who wear rolls of toilet paper and boxes of Tide laundry detergent on their heads are morons who probably shouldn't be permitted even to handle scissors. They won't say that even though they know it's true because people will get upset. And being that we can't inject these announcers with sodium pentothal just before kickoff, we should at least hire research departments that will give them the tools they need to give us an accurate picture of what we're seeing on the field. So that, gentlemen, is my collection of ideas to improve college football on TV. And if there are any angel investors out there interested in getting into the college football industry, give me a call.
Very good.
A standing ovation, no question about it. All right.
He couldn't resist getting Helton into that, could he?
3 or 4 times. And listen, I'm serious, people. Stop leaving those comments about not talking about Clay Helton. I will talk about Clay Helton until I die or I'm fired. And the more you ask me not to, the more times I'm going to reference it.
I'm with you, buddy.
All right, panel. Next Monday is July 4th, and fireworks and explosives will be the order of the day. In your opinion, what is the most explosive offense and defensive play you've seen since watching USC football? And I emphasize explosive. Bruce, what, in your many years of watching USC football, what's the most explosive offensive play and the most explosive defensive play that you've seen?
Okay, look, I didn't have a long time to think about this, and I may be creeping over into this special teams area, but and I'm very and when I think back, I focus a lot on beating the hell out of Notre Dame, and to me, this was a shocking finish, a shocking play to finish a shocking game, and that was the famous verdict to Rod Sherman touchdown pass. We're down 17-0 at the Coliseum against Notre Dame. They're number 1 in the country. It's Parsegan's first year. And we come back and Craig throws the pass to Rod Sherman. Now, was it explosive? No, it was I forget what they called it, 84Z or something like that. He rolled to the left and threw back to his right. But I must tell you also that when I look at really explosive plays on the offensive side, I will never forget the 1974 game, SC against Notre Dame. In the Coliseum, we're down 23-0, 24-0. Anthony Davis scores on a little swing pass at the end of the first half. And the second half, Anthony Davis, this to me is the most explosive play. Simpson had a great one, 67 yards against UCLA, but the Anthony Davis touchdown run off and McKay said to the team just before they left his locker room, AD is going to run the kickoff back for a touchdown. And he received it on the goal line. He went 100 yards. And he told me this story as he went by Parsegan. He gave him a little one of these, bye-bye, which I think is a great little story. And the other one I've just got to mention, because it was such a freak and such a cool thing, also against Notre Dame, Brian Cushing returning an onside kick for a touchdown against Notre Dame, 42 yards or whatever, in a victory over Notre Dame. So those are the most explosive. Now on defense, let me just say this. There've been a lot of them, but if I could aggregate them all, to me, Ronnie Lott made the most meaningful plays of any defensive player we've ever had at SC. And the one game I remember vividly, we played University of South Carolina in the Coliseum. I think it was 1980. They had a guy named George Rogers who went on to win the Heisman Trophy. And I was there, I'll never forget on one of the first plays, he got the ball and he got hammered by Ronnie Lott. And I think Charlie Phillips or one of the other guys was there and hit him too. And thereafter, this guy who won the Heisman Trophy, you could see it. Every time he got the ball, he was looking for 42. So that's, to me, I couldn't bring it down to one play, but to me, that was an incredible defensive. Ronnie Lott was the absolute consummate defensive player for SC. And by the way, an original investor in the Trojan Football Facts, which was the predecessor of We Are SC. And I was one too as well. And so Ronnie's a great guy, but great player. So
Very cool.
That's what I have. Sorry to bring up all the old history, but especially the Notre Dame stuff, I love it.
Well, let's see now, Mark. What's the most explosive offense and defensive plays for you?
So I'll start on defense. I don't know. If you had to choose between Ray knocking Patrick Cowan for a loop on the sideline,
Great one.
or Kevin Ellison knocking Deshaun Jackson into next year, or Taylor Mays knocking half the players on the field into next year, which one would you choose? That's rhetorical. There's no wrong answer. So those are the three that just immediately pop out. On offense, it's a little harder for me. Again, I just read that question recently. So Bruce brought up O.J. Simpson's run. I guess I'll use Reggie Bush's 2.0 version of that because of how important it was at that point of the game. Yeah, I mean, if we want to go special teams, I can Georgia Chica blocking the extra point. There's a lot. Troy Polamalu knocking Aaron Lockett, even though he was there a little early. That was pretty explosive.
That was almost a criminal act. He hit him so early.
His head was down. That's why they say know where the ball is, right?
Yeah.
Chris, what do you think?
So on defense, actually, Ray's hit on Patrick Cowan was the first thing that jumped into my mind. And it was from a terrible game, and it was a 15-yard penalty. But when you just talk about explosive defensive plays, that's the first thing I think about. It looked like he killed him. Right. It was just an absolute brutal shot by a human missile. Offensively, I'm going to stick with the Godfather's theme here, and I'm going to go with 4th and 9, because I don't know that I've ever, with all that was on the line in that game, and 4th and 9 isn't exactly a situation you ever want to be in, and I've never been in a stadium like that. I mean, the intensity in that place, that old stadium was shaking. It was so loud, and as soon as Jarrett catches that ball, You hear about 5,000 USC fans and you hear absolute silence from everybody else in the place. That to me was the most astounding single play that I've ever seen in person, and that's my choice.
Great
All
idea.
right.
Great choice.
All right, I'll wrap up this fourth quarter in regulation. All the ones that have been brought up are all outstanding memories, and you could argue from here to eternity. For me, defensively, excuse me, Charlie Weaver in 1969 totally destroyed UCLA quarterback Dennis Dummett. It was unbelievable. And I think I've mentioned this before, the hit. You need to see it. Go on YouTube and watch Charlie Weaver, All-America defensive end. Dennis Dummett, for some bizarre reason, starts heading upfield, and Weaver saw him and knocked him back about, 5-10 yards. It was unreal. The other offensively, I've kind of always said Simpson's run, 64-yard run, or I could even go with Reggie's run against Fresno State. But I'm going to go with O.J. Simpson's 80-yard run in the 69 Rose Bowl. It was so, in terms of distance, size, speed, cutting ability, anything you ever thought that you didn't know about O.J. Simpson, go to YouTube, 69 Rose Bowl, and watch Simpson rip off that 80-yard run. And it wasn't all offensive line blocking. It was absolutely breathtaking. I've watched it over and over, and to be able to start off with basically a sweep to the left, his cut, once he got through the initial tacklers to reverse his field, was like he had to run it back 3 times to go, how did he do that? And then, of course, world-class sprinting speed, crossing the field, going down the far sideline. It was best I've seen, explosive-wise. All right, let's go to overtime. We're in overtime. It's time to answer some viewer questions for panel answers in a free-for-all format. If you, the viewer or podcast the listener, would like to submit a question that we can answer or give our opinions, just go either to the Gary P. or WeRSC members message boards at wersc.com. From there, you'll see the topic thread regarding questions for the Inside the Trojans Huddle. Again, you jump in if you feel that you want to contribute the answers. Question 1 from Bawana Bob 37 in San Clemente. How can a guy 5'11", 160 be the best receiver in the nation and get a jersey number unretired? I assume he's talking about Jordan Addison. So how do you feel about it, guys?
I think well, first of all, there have been a lot of great receivers that aren't very big. And in fact, I would say one of the best college football players I've ever seen was Rocket Ismail. I mean, nobody was scarier than that guy.
Was great. He was great. Yeah. He was
Every
great.
time he had the ball in his hands, everybody just held their breath. And he wasn't 5'11", 160. He was tiny. But if you want to know why he was the best in the nation, it's because his average game last year was a little over 7 catches for 114 yards and 1.2 touchdowns. If you average that every week of the season, you're going to be pretty great. That's how.
Well, the only reason he ended up being the best is because the best got injured in game 8 at USC. So, and that's not a knock on Jordan. Yeah, I think Jordan is a superstar. He's going to do great at USC as well. I'm going to leave the unretiring of the number alone, just because. Well, you know what? I'm not. I'm going to say this. It should not.
I knew you couldn't hold back. Go ahead.
No, I can't hold back.
I know that. We all know that.
USC should have never put Carson Palmer in a position to approve it. That should not be the player who's had the number retired position. If USC is going to do it, let USC make the decision. That's all I'm going to say on that matter.
Bruce, how do you feel about that?
Well, let me on the retirement of the number. I don't have any strong feelings, honestly, one way or the other. But on the point that Bob in San Clemente makes about how many receivers is enough, Again, I go back to my old song here. I would rather see those scholarships used on the big men, and including the linebackers, defensive line and offensive line. But how can he be the best receiver in the nation? Back to Chris's point, he was the best receiver in the nation last year. So why couldn't he be again? But again, sometimes I question the emphasis of some of the recruiting. Would like to see it be a little more balanced.
I don't think if you turn down a 5-star receiver that means necessarily you get a 5-star offensive lineman in their place. I mean, the simple fact of the matter is we have to recruit a lot of receivers because Lincoln Riley plays 4 to 5 receivers on every play. So you're going to need to have a lot of guys at that position. Does he also recruit offensive linemen? He does. Whether he's going to land any of the big ones he wants, I don't know. We're going to see.
Yeah.
But that's why he recruits a lot of receivers, because he uses a lot of receivers. What are you going to do? You're going to play 4 or 5 guys on every play. You're going to have 13, 14, 15 of those guys on the roster. You just don't.
And are they legitimate receivers, or are they athletes where you can move them around and say, you know what, we can play them on the other side of the ball too? I think that's the type of athlete Lincoln Riley looks for. He really likes those multi sport guys. He's not heavy into the I'm a wide receiver only. That's all the only position I want to play.
Well, I'll just say this. When you ask, how can a guy 5'11", 160 be the best receiver in the nation? Have we forgot Marquise Lee? He was about that size.
Yeah, he was. You're right.
Give or take. And he was considered one of the best in the country. I think the jersey thing is a separate issue. All right, question 2 from Hector Spector. How many receivers are enough? Our wide receiver room is stacked. We're bringing in 2 of the very best in the class, plus probably 2 outstanding tight ends and a very talented H-back, yet we're still chasing more. At some point, doesn't this all get counterproductive?
I think we were just kind of segueing into that.
Right. I jumped into that.
I offer my perspective on that.
Yeah.
You got players who are going to leave, graduating, transferring, whatever. You got to keep the pipeline going.
All right, I think we pretty much in the previous question answered some of that, but question 3 from Dallas Schwartz in Sacramento, California. DB's coach Dante Williams is a lone holdover from the previous regime. Does the horrible play by that group, example given, Chris Smoked Salmon Steele, who spent way too much time looking at the back of the player he was supposed to cover, or seeing another PI flag on the turf, cause concern, worry going into 2022. His abilities, that is Dante Williams, on the recruiting trail are not in question. His coaching abilities are exclamation point. How do you feel about that, panel?
I think it's a legitimate question, and I have the same concern. I think we're going to see this year whether or not what we saw from the secondary last year was Dante distracted because he was trying to do another job that he hadn't initially been hired to do, or whether they're real coaching deficiencies. He's got some guys that can play back there, including a transfer from Colorado who has a ton of experience and a sophomore free safety who is a stud. So if they can't play this year either, then we have our answer. I don't know the answer to the question. I hope that he can coach as well as he can recruit. I'll tell you in October.
But I think a lot of that goes back to the whole Helton regime. And, Dante Williams was thrown into that and trying to make something out of that mess. And I don't know how much of that poor play by those kids was the result of this environment, if you will, that was created by Helton, and kind of a lack of discipline and so forth. So I'm with you, Chris. I don't really know, but I'm going to wait and see to see what happens. But that we can't underestimate how bad the culture was that Helton created. And we just hope we're talking about in a minute. We just hope that none of that rears its ugly head this year.
All right. Question 4, we got two left here. Question 4, 901 graduate. I'm also interested in mainly the comparisons between Steiner and Wiley. Both received raving reviews when they first jumped on board. Steiner was the conditioning coach, and Wiley is the current conditioning coach. Steiner was from Notre Dame. Wiley accompanied Lincoln Riley from Oklahoma. Do people put too much emphasis, do you think, on the strength and conditioning coaches as, quote, how should we put it, that the people are going to really change the program? What do you think?
No, I don't think there's too much emphasis. I think last year Steiner, I don't want to say he got sabotaged, but once the season sunk, whatever, new philosophy and culture and mentality he was trying to build is done, because everybody's lame duck. They're dead men walking. So, whatever their why was in the beginning of the season, when they were running the Coliseum, I guarantee you their why was a lot different by game 6. So yeah, I don't know if it's a fair comparison. Steiner, I don't know if he had a really legitimate opportunity to do his job.
But you could go back even earlier, right? Because Osmus was, everybody was excited when he came back too. Everybody's always excited when you get the new strength and conditioning guy. If the culture of the program is broken, it doesn't matter.
Right.
That's exactly the point. And the one thing that was encouraging, I think it was Nealon came out the other day and was raving about Wiley and how things have really changed and how positive it is. That says something to me. Let's see how it plays out. But I guess I'm more inclined to have an optimistic view of Wiley than I am Steiner, since Wiley has come with Lincoln Riley and come from a winning program.
And Steiner, I believe, has joined Clay Helton at Georgia Southern.
That's all you need to say. I mean, if we went from SC to Georgia Southern, doesn't that tell you something?
Notre Dame to USC to Georgia Southern.
Yeah, that's a real step down, double step. Well, it was, yeah, right.
All right, let's finish it up. Question 5 from Rainman 44. Can Brandon Peely, defensive lineman, assuming he stays healthy, have an impact on the defensive line this season? Is he going to be one of the reasons that explains a defensive turnaround in 2022? Guys, have at it.
Could be. I mean, he's got the ability. He's shown he has the ability. I don't know if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, he's a big kid who, when he arrived, was pretty athletic for a big guy. He's playing at a position of need. So can he? Yeah. In fact, a few weeks ago on this program, I had him as my under the radar guy to watch out for, because I think he could have a big season. But who knows? I don't think even Brandon knows that.
Yeah.
Key point, if he can stay healthy.
I think is very important. He knows this is his final year. If he wants to go to the NFL and have a shot, it's kind of basically put up or shut up time. And so I think the Brandon Peely we're going to see is the very best of Brandon Peely. Whether that's good enough, I don't know, but it only has to be good enough for USC. Okay, if he can contribute and stay healthy, you know what? It'll be a welcome thing for the program, no question about it, and the defense specifically. Reminder again, if you have a question or comments for our panel, go to either of the WeRSC message boards, click on the thread that pertains to Inside the Trojans Huddle viewer or listenership questions. It's very easy to do, and we'd love to have you and answer your questions. So that's a wrap for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. A big thank you to this week's panel, Marc Kulkin, Chris Arledge, Bruce Bagni, and a special thank you to all of you for watching and listening to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Have yourself a great 4th of July. Until next Tuesday, this is your host, Greg Katz, reminding you all to fight on, everybody.